We're going to continue the conversation on Iditarod Rule 35, which has been recently added to the 2017 Iditarod rules. That states that a musher may carry and use a two-way communication device. They are not allowed to use it for coaching. They cannot use it for media purposes. I feel a very loosely written rule that, while trying to add safety, doesn't do it as best as it could be done, and also opens us up to a lot of negative aspects with misuse of a two-way communication device. So the use of a two-way communication device that can only be used in an emergency situation, this is a really, really crucial aspect. There are ways that we can do this. The easiest one is you put the phone or device in something that you can't operate it through, seal it. If it's opened, you need to be able to explain it. I think it's important that you don't lose this item on the trail. Essentially the concern is that somebody would use a sat phone and then discard it, and how would you ever know? Anyway, so that's something that's very important in this rule, is to make sure that it's only used in emergencies and that we do have good ways to use it in an emergency situation. There's some inherent danger anytime you bring a device like this, whether it's from mushers relying on it. I think we saw a little bit of this when the GPS trackers were put on the sleds that had the SOS button. I feel like mushers would go into a situation and the worst case scenario was I hit the help me button. Whereas a few years previously, the worst case scenario is you're stuck out here by yourself for a very long time with no way to get help. And mushers carried the appropriate gear, the food for their dogs, the safety equipment for themselves and for their team, to be able to handle the situation. And the more safety measures we have in place, the more of that we lose, that preemptive caution on the musher's part. However, after the 2016 Iditarod, we saw a few events that were not whether or not the mushers were prepared. They were legitimate safety concerns, and this is what brought around this rule. And I think from that aspect, it's a necessary evil to have the communications. But if we're going to have communications, to have this safety link, then it needs to come with some checks and balances to make sure that it's used appropriately. But I think the choice is important, that mushers have a say. If you want to carry a sat phone, you should be allowed to, under these guidelines and under these rules, so that we can be sure that this isn't being abused. However, you can choose not to. And this was around for many, many years with the emergency locator beacons that we had prior to the GPS trackers that the mushers now carry. Mushers could choose to carry it, but it came at a risk. If you accidentally set off the device, you were disqualified from the race. And that was a deterrent. A lot of mushers chose not to do it because of that. We're asking that the ITC creates a 24-hour hotline or other official avenue to field emergency calls from the mushers. And I think this is what the mushers were hoping for when, in the Iditarod Official Finishers Club meeting after the 2016 race, there was a request sent to the race on behalf of the mushers. It was voted on by the IOFC, and it passed with a majority vote, that there be allowed, or that the ITC allow mushers to carry a two-way communication device that can only communicate with the race. That was the official request there. And what we're talking about here is the 24-hour hotline to field these calls, and this really enhances the safety value of having a two-way communication device. If I have a device out there and I'm in real trouble, who do I call? We're in some very remote places, and I don't think there's anybody here that I would be able to contact that could immediately help me. Anybody that I would contact that I know outside of the race itself would then just immediately contact the race. That's the steps that would be taken, so it's really adding an extra step. If the ITC were to set up their own official line that was only for mushers on the trail, if that phone rang, they would know there was a serious problem, and they could direct us to whoever we needed to be directed to. They could pass the message on. They could communicate with whoever they needed to, whether it be a race veterinarian or a race official or the closest emergency services or the National Guard or the troopers in whatever village we happen to be going through. That's really where this needs to be handled. I mean, the ITC has access to the snow machines and the planes and the trail breakers and the most recent information, and they have contacts in the villages to help the mushers out there. So to help enhance the safety value of this rule, I think this is a necessary step. And in fairness to the ITC, the rule that they currently have doesn't necessarily say that they wouldn't have this. So maybe they're planning on it. We can give them the benefit of the doubt there. And I don't know that this statement needs to be in the rules necessarily, but as long as we get some assurance that this is the direction they're trying to take it. And ultimately, that's what we were looking for after the incidents on the 2016 race, was a way to get mushers assistance in a really dire situation. Not my feet are a little bit cold, not I think I might be lost, not things like that, not being less prepared, not that we want mushers to carry less food or anything to try to speed up the race. What we want is a lifeline. We understand that the Iditarod is dangerous, it comes up with a lot of risks, and we're putting ourselves out there. But you know what? There's always a race next year. We want to make sure that everybody comes to Nome safe and sound and without horror stories from the trail. And that's why we want to make sure that if we're going to have the two-way communication devices on the trail with the mushers, that they're used safely and appropriately and without compromising the integrity of the race, and that they can be effective as a safety tool.